Commander Hyunwoo Park stood in the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council Station. The ceiling reached so high that Earth clouds could have floated there comfortably. Around him, beings from dozens of different worlds moved through the space with purpose. Some walked on 4 legs, others floated in small bubbles of water, and a few moved by hopping on powerful hind legs like giant frogs. Park adjusted his simple human uniform. It looked plain next to the elaborate robes and technological suits worn by the other species. He had been waiting for 3 hours to meet with the council representatives. This was normal treatment for humans. They were still considered the newest and least important members of the galactic community. Finally, a blue-scaled creature approached him. This was Vextar, one of the senior Alterian counselors. The Alterians had been part of the galaxy's government for over 2,000 years. They looked down on younger species, especially humans who had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. "Human Park," Vextar said, his voice carrying that tone all aliens seem to use when speaking to humans. It was the same tone adults used when talking to small children. "Follow me to the briefing room." Park followed the alien down a long corridor lined with windows showing the stars outside. The council station orbited a massive gas giant, and the view was beautiful. But Park kept his attention on Vextar. In his 5 years of military service with Earth's Galactic Defense Force, he had learned that aliens rarely called humans in for good news. The briefing room was smaller than Park expected. Besides Vextar, 2 other beings sat at the curved table. One looked like a walking tree with glowing green leaves, and the other resembled a large spider with silver fur and multiple eyes. Park had learned not to judge alien species by their appearance, but he still felt uncomfortable around the spider-like being. "Sit, human," Vextar said, pointing to a chair that was clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. Park climbed into it and tried to look professional despite his feet not touching the floor. Vextar activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Star charts appeared showing a distant section of the galaxy that Park did not recognize. Red warning symbols marked several systems in the area. "Your species has developed a reputation," the tree-like being said. Its voice sounded like wind through branches. "Humans are known for solving problems in ways that other species would never consider. Sometimes this is useful." The spider creature made a clicking sound that Park's translator identified as laughter. "Useful when we need someone expendable," it added. Park kept his expression neutral. He had heard comments like this many times. Most alien species viewed humans as reckless and unpredictable. They were not entirely wrong. Humans did tend to try things that other species thought were impossible or too dangerous. "There is a situation that requires investigation," Vextar continued. "Long-range scouts have detected something in the Kepler 442 system. It appears to be artificial, very old, and potentially dangerous." The holographic display zoomed in on one particular star system. Park could see several planets, but the display focused on empty space between the 3rd and 4th worlds from the star. Something was definitely there, but it was hard to make out clearly. "The energy readings suggest this is a facility built by the Velthara," the tree being explained. "This is significant because the Velthara civilization disappeared over 3,000 years ago. They were one of the most advanced species ever known." Park leaned forward in his chair. "What happened to them?" "Nobody knows," Vextar said. "One day they simply vanished. Their worlds were found empty, their cities abandoned. No signs of war or disease. They just left." The spider creature activated new images on the display. These showed detailed scans of the mysterious object in the Kepler 442 system. It was clearly not natural. The structure was enormous, stretching for kilometers through space. Its design was beautiful but alien, with crystalline formations that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. "Our scientists believe this is a Velthara weapon facility," Vextar said. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we have ever seen. If the technology still functions after 3,000 years, it could be extremely powerful. Powerful enough to change the balance of the current war with the Zephyrian Empire," the tree being added. Park knew about the Zephyrians. They were an aggressive species that had been expanding their territory for the past century. Their military was strong, and they showed no interest in peaceful negotiations. Several smaller civilizations had already been conquered or destroyed by Zephyrian forces. "Why send humans?" Park asked. "Surely your own scientists and military experts would be better suited for this mission." The three aliens exchanged glances. Vextar was the one who answered. "The facility may be dangerous. Previous attempts by other species to investigate Valthara ruins have not always ended well. We need someone willing to take risks that more sensible species would avoid." "You mean someone expendable," Park said quietly. "That is one way to put it," the spider creature said with another clicking laugh. Park looked at the star charts again. The mission was obviously dangerous, possibly suicidal. The aliens were sending humans because they did not want to risk their own people. If the human team died, it would not be a great loss from the Council's perspective. But Park also saw an opportunity. Humans had been trying to prove themselves to the galactic community for 50 years. Most aliens still saw them as primitive and reckless. A successful mission like this could change that perception. "What exactly do you want us to do?" Park asked. "Travel to the coordinates, investigate the facility, and determine if the weapon system is still functional," Vextar said. "If it is, find a way to bring the technology back to the Council. And if we encounter problems, try not to die too quickly," the spider creature said. "We would like to receive some useful data before you are killed." Park stood up from his chair. "I'll need to select my team and prepare our ship." "Already done," Vextar said. He handed Park a datapad containing mission details. "Dr. Mina Choi has been assigned as your xenoarchaeologist. She has experience with ancient alien technology. Your engineer will be Daeho Kim, pilot Jin-A Lee, and communications specialist Taemin Oh." Park reviewed the files quickly. All good people, all human. The Council was not risking any of their own species on this mission. "When do we depart?" Park asked. "As soon as possible," the tree being replied. "Zephyrian forces have been detected moving in that direction. If they reach the facility before you do, they will claim the weapon for themselves." Park nodded and turned to leave. As he reached the door, Vextar called out to him. "Human Park," the Altarian said. "Do try to be careful. Despite what my colleagues suggest, the Council would prefer that you survive this mission. Dead humans cannot provide useful intelligence reports." Park left the briefing room with mixed feelings. The mission was dangerous, possibly impossible. The Council clearly expected him and his team to die. But if they could succeed, if they could bring back Valthara technology, it might change everything for humanity. As he walked through the station corridors toward the human quarters, Park began planning. He would need to brief his team carefully. They would all understand the risks, but they would also understand the opportunity. 3 hours later, Park stood in the docking bay looking at their assigned ship. The Hanbok was a small research vessel, designed more for scientific investigation than combat. It was fast and had good sensors, but would be no match for Zephyrian warships if they encountered any. Dr. Choi was already aboard, reviewing the mission data. She was a brilliant scientist who had spent years studying alien civilizations. If anyone could understand Valthara technology, it would be her. The rest of the team arrived within the hour. They were all experienced, all volunteers. Park briefed them on the mission, making sure they understood the dangers. "The Council thinks we're expendable," he told them. "They're probably right. But we might also be the only ones crazy enough to actually succeed at this." Ginny laughed from the pilot's seat. "Crazy humans doing impossible things. Sounds like a normal Tuesday." As their ship left the Council station and jumped to hyperspace, Park looked back at the star charts one more time. 3 weeks to reach the Kepler 442 system. 3 weeks to prepare for whatever they might find there. He just hoped it would be enough time. 3 weeks of hyperspace travel felt like 3 months to the crew of the Hanbok. The small research ship was comfortable enough, but being confined in a metal box with the same 4 people for that long tested everyone's patience. Park spent most of his time reviewing the mission files and studying what little was known about Valthara technology. Dr. Mina Choi worked constantly, preparing translation programs and analysis tools. She had brought along every piece of equipment that might help them understand alien technology. Her excitement about the mission was obvious, and it helped keep the team's spirits up during the long journey. Dae-ho Kim, their engineer, used the time to modify their scanning equipment. He wanted to make sure they could detect any dangers before walking into them. Ginny Lee kept the ship running smoothly and practiced emergency maneuvers in case they needed to escape quickly. Tae-min-oh monitored galactic communications, looking for any news about Zephyrian movements in their direction. On the 21st day, Jin-ae called everyone to the bridge. "We're dropping out of hyperspace in 10 minutes, she announced. "Everyone should see this." The crew gathered around the main viewport as the ship returned to normal space. What they saw made them all fall silent with wonder. The Kepler 442 system looked normal at first, a yellow star similar to Earth's sun, with several planets orbiting at various distances. But as their sensors focused on the coordinates provided by the Council, something extraordinary appeared on their screens. "By all the gods of Earth," Dr. Choi whispered. Floating in space between the third and fourth planets was a structure unlike anything any of them had ever seen. It was enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction. The design was beautiful and impossible at the same time. Crystalline towers twisted through space, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solidified light. The entire structure glowed with a soft blue radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. "It's not orbiting anything," Dae-ho said, studying his instruments. "It's just sitting there in empty space, maintaining perfect position." Jin-ae piloted the hanbok closer, moving carefully. "The gravitational readings are strange," she reported. "It's like the station is creating its own gravity, field independent of the planets." Taemin's communication equipment picked up faint signals coming from the structure. "There's some kind of transmission," he said. "Very weak, but it's definitely artificial. The pattern repeats every few minutes." Park stared at the ancient station, through the viewport. After 3,000 years, it was still functioning. Whatever power source the Vailthara had used, it was far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could build. "Life signs?" Park asked. Dae-ho shook his head. "None that I can detect, but the power readings are incredible. The station is running at about 40% capacity." Dr. Choi was practically bouncing with excitement. "Think about what this means," she said. "This technology has been running for 3 millennia without maintenance. If we can understand how it works, it could revolutionize everything." As they approached the station, more details became visible. The crystalline structures were covered with patterns that might have been writing or decoration. Lights moved through the transparent walls like living things, following pathways that made no sense to human eyes. "There," Jin-ae pointed to a section of the station that looked different from the rest. "That might be a docking bay." The area she indicated had a more mechanical appearance, with what appeared to be airlock doors and guidance lights. As the hanbok moved closer, the lights began to flash in a welcoming pattern. "It knows we're here," Tae-min said quietly. Park made a decision. "Take us in, Jin-ae. Nice and slow." The docking procedure was surprisingly easy. As soon as the hanbok approached the bay, guide beams reached out and gently pulled them into position. Mechanical arms extended to secure their ship, and an airlock tube connected to their docking hatch. "Atmosphere on the other side," Dae-ho reported, reading his instruments. "Oxygen, nitrogen, trace gases, it's breathable for humans." Dr. Choi was already putting on her exploration gear. "The translation computer is ready," she said. "If there's any written language in there, we should be able to make some sense of it." Park suited up as well, though he kept his weapons ready. Ancient or not, they had no idea what they might find inside the station. "Tae-min, stay with the ship and monitor communications. If anything goes wrong, get word back to Earth." The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. Beyond it lay a corridor that glowed with the same soft blue light they had seen from outside. The walls were smooth and seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the exterior, but they felt warm to the touch. As they stepped into the station, gravity took hold. It felt normal, just like Earth gravity. The air smelled clean, with a faint metallic taste. Motion sensors are picking up movement, Deho said, checking his portable scanner. But it might just be the station's systems. They moved carefully down the corridor. The walls were covered with symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. Dr. Choi stopped frequently to record the patterns with her equipment. The symbols are responding to our presence, she said with wonder. They're trying to communicate. With us. Taemin's voice came through their communication devices. I'm getting stronger signals from deeper in the station. Whatever is broadcasting that repeated message, it's somewhere ahead of you. The corridor branched several times, but the main path was obvious. It led toward the center of the station, where the brightest light seemed to originate. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a vast chamber that took their breath away. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows high above. In the center stood a structure that looked like a throne made of living crystal. It pulsed with inner light, and the patterns on its surface moved like flowing water. Above the crystal throne, holographic displays showed star maps of the entire galaxy. Different colored lights marked various star systems, but the meaning of the colors was not clear. Incredible, Dr. Choi breathed. This is some kind of control center. Park approached the throne carefully. It was clearly designed for a humanoid being, though probably someone taller than humans. The crystal surface felt warm and seemed to vibrate slightly under his touch. As he got closer, the holographic displays became more active. Star maps zoomed in and out, showing different sections of the galaxy. Some systems were marked with red symbols, others with yellow and a few with blue. The red ones might be dead systems, Dr. Choi suggested, studying the display. The yellow could be inhabited worlds. What about the blue ones? Deho asked. There were very few blue markers on the map, and they were scattered widely across the galaxy. None of them were in areas that the current galactic civilizations knew well. Suddenly, the chamber filled with brighter light. The crystal throne began to glow more intensely, and new displays appeared in the air around them. The team backed away, unsure what was happening. Then a figure materialized in the center of the room. It was tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to shine with its own light. The being's eyes were large and luminous, and its features had an alien beauty that was both strange and appealing. It wore robes that seemed to be made of the same crystal material as the station. Greetings, visitors from the young worlds, the figure said. Its voice was clear and spoke in perfect Korean, though none of them had used that language since boarding the station. Park stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. Are you Velthara? The being nodded slowly. I am Keeper Silandros. I have been waiting here for 3,000 of your years, watching for a species that might prove worthy of what we left behind. Dr. Choi could barely contain her excitement. Your people, where did they go? What happened to the Valthara civilization? Silandros looked sad, an expression that was surprisingly easy to read despite his alien features. My people transcended physical existence long ago. I alone remain, bound to this station to fulfill our final duty. What duty? Park asked. To test those who come seeking power, Silandros replied. Many species have found this place over the centuries. All have failed the trial we prepared. The holographic displays changed, showing images of different alien species. Park recognized some of them as civilizations that were now extinct. What happened to them? Deho asked quietly. They sought only dominance over others, Silandros said. When faced with the choice between wisdom and power, they chose power. The universe is safer without them. Park felt a chill run down his spine. This was not just an ancient weapon they had discovered. It was a test, and failure might mean the end of human civilization. What kind of test? He asked. Silandros gestured toward the crystal throne. One of your kind must interface with our greatest creation. It will reveal the true nature of your species. If you seek only to dominate others, you will be given the means to try. Most cannot resist the temptation, and if they use that power, then they prove themselves unworthy to inherit the galaxy, Silandros said simply. We built safeguards to ensure that aggressive species cannot spread their violence beyond their own worlds. The implications were terrifying. The Galactic Council, had sent them to find a weapon, but this device would judge humanity itself. If they approached it with the wrong intentions, their entire species might pay the price. The team stood in stunned silence as Silandros explained the true nature of the station. What they had expected to be a simple weapon recovery mission had become something far more dangerous. The fate of their entire species might depend on the choices they made in the next few hours. Dr. Choi was the first to speak. "How many species have taken this test?" she asked. Silandros gestured to the holographic display above them. The star map showed dozens of red markers scattered across the galaxy. 47 civilizations have attempted the trial over the past 3 millennia, he said. None have proven worthy. "What exactly happens during the test?" Park asked. The ancient being moved toward the crystal throne at the center of the chamber. As he approached, the crystalline structure began to glow brighter, and new patterns appeared in its depths. The consciousness amplifier connects directly to the mind of the test subject, Silandros explained. It reveals the deepest thoughts, desires, and motivations of not just the individual, but their entire species. More importantly, it shows them how to achieve their greatest ambitions. Deho studied the device with his engineer's eye. "It reads minds?" "Much more than that," Silandros replied. "It expands consciousness to a level your species has never experienced. The subject will see every possible path to power, every way to make their civilization dominant over all others." "The knowledge is intoxicating." Janae looked worried. "And if someone uses that knowledge, then automated systems throughout the galaxy activate," Silandros said sadly. "My people built many safeguards before they transcended. Species that prove themselves too dangerous are prevented from spreading their aggression to other worlds." Park walked around the crystal throne, examining it from all angles. The device was beautiful but alien, with curves and angles that seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at them. "Why do you do this?" Park asked. "Why test other species at all?" Silandros turned to face him, and Park could see ancient weariness in those luminous eyes. "Because the galaxy needs guardians," the being said. "My people learned too late that intelligence without wisdom leads to destruction. We nearly destroyed ourselves before we understood the true nature of consciousness." Dr. Choi pulled out her recording equipment. "What did you learn?" "That all conscious minds are connected at the deepest level," Silandros said. "What affects one species ultimately affects all others. A civilization that seeks only dominance over others will eventually turn that aggression inward and destroy itself." The holographic displays changed, showing images of beautiful worlds that were now dead and lifeless. These were the homeworlds of species that had failed the test. "We hope to find a species wise enough to understand this truth without having to learn it through destruction," Silandros continued. "A people who could serve as teachers and guides for younger civilizations." Taemin's voice came through their communication devices with sudden urgency. "Commander, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting ships approaching the system. Multiple contacts moving fast." Park activated his portable communicator. "How long until they arrive?" "At their current speed, maybe 4 hours, Taemin replied. "The energy signatures match Zephyrian warships." Silandros looked concerned. "The Zephyrians are known to me. They have sent scouts here before, though none attempted the trial. If they bring a full military force, they'll try to take the technology by force," Park finished. "That would be unfortunate," Silandros said. "The station's defenses are still active. If they attack, the automated systems will respond. The results would be devastating for both sides." Park made a quick decision. "How long does the test take?" "The consciousness amplifier can complete its work in minutes," Silandros replied. "But the subject needs time to process what they experience. Most who take the trial spend hours exploring the knowledge they are given." "Hours we don't have," Dr. Choi said. Jin-A was studying the tactical situation. "Even if we wanted to run, the Hanbok is a research ship. Zephyrian cruisers would catch us easily." Park looked at his team. They were all thinking the same thing. Someone would have to take the test, and it would have to be soon. "I'll do it," Park said. "Commander, that's incredibly dangerous," Deho protested. We don't know what that thing will do to your mind. That's exactly why it has to be me, Park replied. I'm the mission commander. The responsibility is mine. Dr. Choi stepped forward. What if the test changes you? What if you come out of there wanting to conquer the galaxy? Park smiled grimly. Then you'll have to stop me. Silandros had been listening to their discussion with interest. Your species intrigues me, humans. In all my centuries of existence, few test subjects have shown such concern for others before taking the trial. What do you mean? Park asked. Most species that reach this chamber arrive with conquest already in their hearts, Silandros explained. They see the trial as an obstacle to obtaining power. You seem more interested in protecting others than in gaining strength for yourselves. Timon's voice interrupted them again. Commander, the Zephyrian ships have increased speed. They'll be here in 3 hours. Park walked over to the crystal throne and placed his hand on its surface. The material felt warm and seemed to pulse with life. What should I expect? He asked Silandros. The amplifier will show you things about your own mind that you never knew existed, the ancient being said. You will see the darkest thoughts that live in the depths of human consciousness. More dangerous, you will see how to make those dark thoughts reality. How do I resist the temptation? Silandros looked at him with something that might have been hope. Remember why you came here. Not what the council wanted you to find, but what you hoped to accomplish. Park thought about that. The council had sent them to retrieve a weapon that could defeat the Zephyrians. But what Park really wanted was to protect the smaller civilizations that couldn't defend themselves against aggressive species. The test will offer you the power to make humanity supreme over all other species, Silandros warned. It will show you exactly how to achieve that goal. The knowledge will feel like the solution to every problem your people have ever faced. Dr. Choi was recording everything. How do we know if he passes or fails? If he passes, he will understand. Truths about consciousness that my people spent millennia learning, Silandros said. If he fails. The ancient being gestured to the red markers on the star map. Park settled into the crystal throne. As soon as he made contact with the device, he felt a tingling sensation spread through his body. Remember, Silandros said, as the crystal began to glow brighter, power without wisdom destroys those who wield it. The question is not whether you can take control of the galaxy. The question is whether you should. The last thing Park heard before the consciousness amplifier activated was Jin'e's voice from their ship. Zephyrian ships have entered the system. They're heading straight for us. Then his awareness exploded outward, and Park found himself experiencing thoughts and sensations beyond anything he had ever imagined. The trial had begun, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Around him, his team could only watch and hope that their commander would make the right choice when offered the power to rule the galaxy. As the consciousness amplifier took hold of Park's mind, his awareness expanded beyond anything he thought possible. Suddenly, he could perceive not just his own thoughts, but the mental patterns of every living being in the galaxy. It was overwhelming, at first like trying to listen to a billion conversations at the same time, but gradually, Park began to understand what he was experiencing. The device was showing him the fundamental structure of consciousness itself. Every thinking creature in the universe was connected through quantum fields that existed below normal reality. Thoughts, emotions, and desires flowed between minds in patterns that were both beautiful and terrifying. Through this expanded awareness, Park could see the true nature of every species in the galaxy. The Alterians were not as wise as they pretended to be. Their blue-scaled exterior hid minds full of fear and jealousy. The tree-like beings on the council were driven by an ancient hunger for control that they had learned to disguise as wisdom, and the Zephyrians, whose ships were now approaching the station, were exactly what they appeared to be. Their minds burned with a desire to dominate and destroy anything they could not control. Through the quantum field, Park could feel their thoughts as they planned their attack on the ancient station. But the amplifier showed him more than just the nature of other species. It revealed the deepest truths about humanity as well. Park saw every dark thought that had ever existed in a human mind. The desire for revenge, the hunger for power, the willingness to destroy others to protect what was theirs. He saw how humans could use the knowledge he was gaining. With his expanded consciousness, Park could manipulate the quantum fields that connected all minds. He could influence the thoughts and decisions of entire civilizations without them ever knowing what was happening. Humanity could become the secret rulers of the galaxy within a single generation. The temptation was incredible. Park saw exactly how to do it. He could make the Alterians believe that humans deserved equal representation on the council. He could convince the Zephyrians to turn their aggression toward uninhabited systems instead of attacking peaceful worlds. He could guide every major decision in the galaxy to benefit humanity, while making other species think the ideas were their own. It would be so easy. Humans had been dismissed and underestimated for 50 years. Here was the power to change that forever. No more being treated like primitive children by ancient civilizations. No more being sent on suicide missions because human lives were considered expendable. But as Park explored these possibilities through the amplifier, he began to see their consequences. Every species that had tried to use this power had followed the same pattern. First, they used their abilities to protect their own people and gain respect from others. That seemed reasonable and justified. Then they began to guide other civilizations toward decisions that benefited their own species more. That also seemed fair, since they were the ones with the wisdom to see the bigger picture. Finally, they started actively controlling other minds to ensure their own dominance. By then, they had convinced themselves that this was for the good of the galaxy. After all, they were the most advanced species. Everyone would be better off under their guidance. The consciousness amplifier showed Park the final fate of every species that had followed this path. The quantum field that connected all conscious minds was delicate. Attempts to control it from a position of dominance always led to a cascade failure that destroyed the aggressor species. It was like trying to control a spider's web by pulling on one strand. Eventually, the whole structure collapsed. Through his expanded awareness, Park could feel his team watching him with concern. The process had only been running for a few minutes, but he could sense their worry. Dr. Choi was recording everything, trying to understand what was happening to him. Daeho was monitoring his vital signs and growing alarmed at what he saw. Jin'e's voice came through the station's communication system. The Zephyrian ships are demanding that we surrender the station to them. They're charging weapons. Park felt a moment of anger. Even now, with everything that was at stake, the Zephyrians thought only of taking what belonged to others. He could end their threat so easily. A small manipulation of their ship's computer systems, a subtle influence on their commanders' minds, and the entire fleet would destroy itself. But that would be using the power for violence, and Park was beginning to understand why that path led to destruction. Silandros appeared beside him in the expanded consciousness. The ancient being was not physically present, but his mind touched Park's through the quantum field. "You see the truth now," Silandros said. "Power over others is ultimately power over nothing. Those who seek dominance destroy the very connections that make consciousness possible. But humanity could do better," Park argued. "We're not like the other species. We could use this responsibly." "That is what they all believed," Silandros replied sadly. Each species thought they were different, that they were wise enough to wield ultimate power without being corrupted by it. Through the amplifier, Park saw the final moments of the Vialthera civilization. They had not been destroyed by their enemies or wiped out by disease. They had chosen to transcend physical existence rather than continue down the path of controlling other species. We realized that the only way to have power without being corrupted by it was to give up individual existence entirely, Silandros explained. We merged our consciousness with the quantum field itself, becoming part of the connections between minds rather than trying to control them. Park understood now why the Vialthera had built this test. They were looking for a species that could learn from their mistakes without having to make those mistakes themselves. But what was the alternative? If humanity rejected the power offered by the consciousness amplifier, they would remain weak. The Zephyrians would continue their expansion, the Council would continue to treat humans as expendable, and countless innocent beings would suffer. "There is another way," Silandros said, sensing Park's thoughts. "Instead of using power to control others, it can be used to help them understand themselves. The ancient being showed Park a different possibility. What if the consciousness amplifier could be modified? Instead of giving one species ultimate power over others, what if it could help different civilizations truly understand each other? Park saw how it could work. Rather than expanding one mind to godlike proportions, the device could create a network that allowed different species to experience each other's thoughts and motivations directly. Wars would become much harder to justify when each side could truly comprehend their enemy's perspective. It would not give humanity dominance over the galaxy, but it would give them something potentially more valuable, the ability to bring peace through understanding. Janae's voice interrupted his thoughts. Commander, the Zephyrians are demanding an immediate response. If we don't surrender in 10 minutes, they're going to open fire. Park made his choice. Instead of accepting the ultimate power offered by the consciousness amplifier, he began to work on modifying it. Using the expanded awareness the device had given him, he started to restructure the quantum field connections. Rather than amplifying one consciousness to control others, he would create a network that allowed minds to touch each other gently, sharing understanding without domination. Silandros watched his work with growing amazement. In 3,000 years, no test subject has ever thought to modify the amplifier itself, he said. Maybe that's because we're not trying to pass your test, Park replied. We're trying to solve a different problem entirely. As Park worked, alarms began to sound throughout the station. The Zephyrian ships had opened fire and their weapons were impacting the ancient structure's shields. But Park continued his modifications, knowing that this might be humanity's only chance to change the galaxy for the better. The consciousness amplifier began to pulse with new patterns of light as Park reshaped its fundamental nature. Instead of offering ultimate power to one species, it would soon offer understanding to all of them. But first he had to finish the work before the Zephyrians destroyed the station completely. The Zephyrian weapons hammered against the station's shields with increasing intensity. Each impact sent vibrations through the crystalline structure, making the walls pulse with alarmed light. Park could feel the ancient defenses weakening under the sustained attack, but he forced himself to concentrate on his work with the consciousness amplifier. Dr. Choi watched the energy readings on her instruments with growing concern. The modification you're making is affecting the entire station, she reported. Power levels are fluctuating everywhere. Daeho was monitoring the shield systems. We have maybe 15 minutes before their weapons break through, he said grimly. Park continued his work, reshaping the quantum field connections with careful precision. What he was attempting had never been tried before. Instead of amplifying consciousness to godlike levels, he was creating a network that would allow different species to share thoughts and emotions directly. Through the modified amplifier, Park began to broadcast a new kind of signal throughout the galaxy. It was subtle at first, just a gentle touch on the minds of conscious beings across thousands of star systems. But gradually, the effect began to spread. On a Zephyrian command ship attacking the station, Captain Vorthak suddenly felt something he had never experienced before. For just a moment he could sense the fear and confusion of the humans inside the ancient structure. They were not the weak cowards he had expected. They were people trying to protect something important, people with families and hopes just like his own crew. The sensation was so unexpected that Vorthak hesitated before giving his next order, to fire. On the Galactic Council station, Counselor Vextar was in a meeting with other species representatives when the network touched his mind. Suddenly he could feel the genuine desire to help others that motivated many of the younger species they had been dismissing. The emotions were alien but recognizable. These newer civilizations were not just ambitious primitives. They were people, struggling to find their place in a vast and often hostile galaxy. Dr. Choi gasped as she felt the network brush against her own consciousness. Commander, what are you doing? I can sense the thoughts of beings across the galaxy. I'm giving everyone a chance to understand each other, Park replied, not stopping his work. Instead of using power to control others, we're going to help them see through each other's eyes. Silandros watched the process with fascination. This is remarkable, he said. You are creating connections without dominance, understanding, without control. The network continued to spread, touching minds on hundreds of worlds. Species that had been at war for centuries suddenly found themselves experiencing their enemies' perspectives directly. The effect was not overwhelming like the original consciousness amplifier. Instead, it was gentle, like a whisper that helped each being understand the motivations of others. On the attacking Zephyrian ships, confusion was spreading through the crews. They had come here expecting to fight weak humans and claim powerful technology. But now they could feel the genuine concern and protective instincts of the people they were attacking. The humans were not trying to claim ultimate power. They were trying to prevent anyone from having that kind of power. Ginny's voice came through the communication system with surprise. "Commander, the Zephyrian attack is slowing down. Some of their ships have stopped firing entirely." Park felt a moment of hope, but he knew his work was not finished. The network was active but not yet stable. If he stopped now, the connections would fade and everything would return to normal. "I need more time," he said. Deho checked the shield readings. "The barriers are holding for now, but barely. The Zephyrians may have slowed their attack, but they haven't stopped completely." Through the network, Park could sense the confusion spreading through the Zephyrian fleet. Some of the ship commanders were beginning to question their orders. For the first time in their lives, they could feel the fear and pain they caused in others. It was a disturbing experience for a species that had built their entire culture around dominance and aggression, but not all of them were affected equally. Admiral Korath, the fleet commander, was fighting against the network's influence. His mind was so focused on conquest that he could barely perceive the thoughts and emotions of other beings. "All ships, continue the attack," Korath ordered his fleet. "This is some kind of mental trick. Do not let it weaken your resolve." Several of his captains hesitated to obey. Captain Vorthak was staring at his weapons controls, unable to bring himself to fire on beings whose thoughts and emotions he could now sense directly. "Captain Vorthak, execute attack pattern 7 immediately," Admiral Korath commanded. "Sir," Vorthak replied slowly, "perhaps we should try to communicate with them first. They may not be hostile." "They are humans," Korath snarled. "They are weak, and they possess technology that belongs to us. Fire your weapons, or I will have you executed for cowardice." The network was creating cracks in the Zephyrian military structure, but it was not enough to stop the attack completely. Park realized he needed to do something more direct. Through the consciousness amplifier, he reached out specifically to the Zephyrian crews. Instead of just letting them sense human emotions, he shared human memories. He showed them what it felt like to have your home threatened, to fear for the safety of your loved ones, to fight not for conquest but for survival. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the Zephyrian fleet, crew members began to understand for the first time what their victims experienced during their conquests. The realization was shocking for beings who had never considered the perspectives of others. On the command ship, Admiral Korath felt his control slipping away as his own officers began to question their mission. "Destroy that station now," he ordered desperately, "before it weakens us further." But it was too late. Captain Vorthak and several other ship commanders had made a different choice. Instead of continuing their attack, they began to withdraw their vessels from weapons range. "Admiral," Vorthak said over the fleet communication channel, "I cannot continue this attack. These beings are not our enemies. They are trying to create something that could bring peace to the galaxy." Other captains began to voice similar thoughts. For the first time in Zephyrian history, a military fleet was refusing orders based on moral considerations rather than fear. Admiral Korath realized that he was losing control of his entire fleet. In desperation, he took manual control of his flagship's weapons and prepared to destroy the station himself. But as his finger moved toward the firing control, the network touched his mind as well. For just a moment, Korath experienced what Park was feeling. The human commander was not trying to defeat enemies or claim power. He was trying to save lives and create understanding between species that had been fighting for centuries. The admiral's hand froze on the weapon controls. For the first time in his long military career, he was questioning whether victory was worth the cost. Park felt the change throughout the Zephyrian fleet as the network took hold. The immediate threat to the station was fading, but his work was not complete. He had created connections between minds, but now he needed to make those connections permanent. Working with intense concentration, Park began to establish the network throughout the galaxy's quantum field structure. It would become a permanent part of consciousness itself, allowing all species to understand each other without anyone having complete control over the system. "It's working," Dr. Choi said with amazement. "I can feel the thoughts of beings on dozens of worlds, but it's not overwhelming. It's like having empathy for everyone at once." Silandros nodded with approval. "You have found the solution my people searched for over millennia," he said. "Power shared is power that cannot corrupt." As Park completed his modifications to the consciousness amplifier, he felt the network stabilize throughout the galaxy. Wars did not end immediately, but they became much harder to justify when each side could truly understand their opponent's perspectives. The ancient station had become something new, not a weapon of destruction, but a tool for understanding. And humanity had proven themselves worthy not of transcendence, but of something perhaps more important: the role of teachers in a galaxy that desperately needed to learn how to live in peace. But even as Park felt satisfaction at what he had accomplished, he knew that the real work was just beginning. Creating understanding between species was only the first step toward building a better galaxy. Park slowly opened his eyes and found himself back in his own body. The consciousness amplifier had released him from its embrace, but he could still feel the network of connections he had created throughout the galaxy. It was like having a new sense that allowed him to perceive the thoughts and emotions of countless beings across the stars. His team was gathered around him, their faces showing relief and concern. Dr. Choi was taking readings with her medical scanner, while Dae-ho monitored the station's systems. "How do you feel?" Dr. Choi asked. "Different," Park admitted. "I can sense things I never could before, but I'm still myself." Janae's voice came through the communication system. "Commander, the Zephyrian ships have stopped their attack. Most of them are withdrawing, but Admiral Korath's flagship is requesting permission to board the station." Park struggled to his feet, still adjusting to the changes in his consciousness. Through the network, he could feel the confusion and inner conflict raging in the Zephyrian admiral's mind. "Let him come aboard," Park said. "But keep our ship ready for a quick departure, just in case." Silandros materialized beside them, his expression showing something that might have been pride. "You have done something remarkable, human. In 3,000 years, no species has found a way to use our technology for creation rather than destruction." "What happens now?" Taman asked, over the communication channel. "Now the galaxy begins to change," Silandros replied. "The network you have created will spread understanding between species, but it will not force peace upon them. They must still choose cooperation over conflict." Dr. Choi was studying the modified consciousness amplifier with fascination. "The power requirements have actually decreased," she reported. "Sharing consciousness among many beings takes less energy than amplifying one mind to godlike levels." 20 minutes later, Admiral Korath entered the chamber escorted by 2 of his officers. The Zephyrian commander was tall and covered with thick armor-like scales. His species had evolved for war, but Park could sense uncertainty in his thoughts. "Human," Korath said, his voice carrying less aggression than Park had expected. "What have you done to my fleet?" "I've helped them understand the consequences of their actions," Park replied calmly. "For the first time, they can feel what their victims experienced during Zephyrian attacks." Korath's scaled features showed confusion. "My officers refuse to follow orders. They claim that conquest is morally wrong. This is not the Zephyrian way." "Maybe it's time for your people to find a new way," Dr. Choi suggested. The Admiral looked at the consciousness amplifier with both fear and fascination. "Is this weapon responsible for the change in my crews?" "It's not a weapon," Park explained. "It's a tool for understanding. Your people can still make their own choices, but now they can see the full consequences of those choices." Through the network, Park could feel similar conversations happening throughout the galaxy. On the Galactic Council Station, species representatives were experiencing genuine empathy for smaller civilizations they had previously ignored. On Zephyrian worlds, military commanders were questioning orders to attack peaceful settlements. The changes were not universal. Some beings were too set in their ways to be affected by the network. Others actively fought against the new understanding, preferring their old prejudices and hatreds. But enough minds were opening to make a difference. Tae Min's voice interrupted their conversation. "Commander, we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations. Several wars have suddenly stopped as opposing forces try to negotiate, and there are reports of spontaneous peace treaties being signed on dozens of worlds." Admiral Korath looked troubled. "If my people abandon their warrior culture, what will become of the Zephyrian Empire?" "Your empire was built on the suffering of others," Park said gently. "But your people have skills and knowledge that could be valuable in peaceful contexts. Engineering, organization, logistics. The galaxy needs those abilities used for construction rather than destruction." Silandros stepped forward. "The consciousness network will not force your people to change, Admiral, but it will make it impossible for them to ignore the consequences of their actions. The choice of what to do with that knowledge remains theirs." Over the following hours, the team received reports from throughout the galaxy. The network was stabilizing, creating permanent connections between the minds of different species. Wars were not ending immediately, but they were becoming much more difficult to sustain when soldiers could feel the pain they caused. Dr. Choi worked with Silandros to understand the technical aspects of what Park had created. "The network is self-maintaining," she explained. "It draws power from the natural quantum fields that connect all consciousness. As more beings become part of it, it actually grows stronger." "Will everyone eventually be connected?" Deho asked. "Only those who choose to be," Silandros replied. "The network does not force itself upon unwilling minds, but most conscious beings, when given the opportunity to truly understand others, will choose connection over isolation." Admiral Korath spent several hours in conversation with Park and his team. Through the network, the Zephyrian commander was experiencing perspectives and emotions that were completely foreign to his warrior culture. "This is disturbing," Korath admitted finally. "I can feel the fear and sadness of beings my people have conquered. It makes military action seem cruel." "That's the point," Jinne said from her position at the communication console. "Your people have been causing that fear and sadness for generations. Now you can understand what it feels like from the other side." As news of the consciousness network spread throughout the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Some species welcomed the increased understanding and empathy. Others saw it as a threat to their traditional ways of life. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages demanding that the humans return immediately to explain their actions. Several military powers began moving fleets toward the ancient station, though their intentions were unclear. "We need to leave soon," Park told his team. "This station will become a focal point for every faction in the galaxy. Some will want to study it, others will want to destroy it." Silandros overheard their conversation. "I will remain here to guard the station," the ancient being said. "But you are correct that it is no longer safe for your small team." Dr. Choi looked disappointed. "There's so much more we could learn from Valthara technology. The important work is done," Silandros replied. "The network will continue to grow and spread understanding throughout the galaxy, but it will need guides and teachers to help others adapt to this new way of thinking." Park understood what the ancient being was suggesting. "You want us to become ambassadors for the network? Your species has proven uniquely suited for this role," Silandros said. "Humans have always been skilled at building bridges between different groups. Now you have the opportunity to do that, on a galactic scale." As the Hanbok prepared to leave the ancient station, Admiral Korath made an unexpected request. "I wish to accompany you," he said. "My own people may not listen to me anymore, but perhaps I can help other species understand what the network offers." Park was surprised by the request, but after sensing the genuine change in the Zephyrians' thoughts, he agreed. The journey back to Council Space took 3 weeks, the same as their original trip, but everything had changed. Throughout the galaxy, the Consciousness Network was creating new possibilities for peace and cooperation. It would take time for old conflicts to end and new relationships to form, but the foundation for a better future had been established. When they finally arrived at the Galactic Council Station, they found representatives from dozens of species waiting to meet them. Some were angry about the changes the network had brought to their civilizations. Others were grateful for the new understanding it provided. Park stood before the assembled representatives, knowing that this moment would determine humanity's future role in the galaxy. "You were sent to find a weapon," Counselor Vextar said, his tone less condescending than Park remembered. "Instead, you have created something that threatens the established order of galactic civilization." "We created something that makes the established order unnecessary," Park replied calmly. "When different species can truly understand each other, there's no need for the fear and suspicion that have driven galactic politics for millennia." The debates that followed lasted for weeks, but gradually, even the most resistant species began to see the value of what the Consciousness Network offered. Wars were expensive and destructive. Peace built through mutual understanding was more profitable and sustainable. Humanity found itself in a new role as teachers and facilitators for interspecies communication. The ancient station became a diplomatic center, with Park and his team serving as guides for beings learning to navigate the Consciousness Network. Years later, Park often reflected on the mission that had changed everything. The Galactic Council had sent them to find a forgotten superweapon. Instead, they had discovered that humanity itself was the weapon the galaxy needed. Not a tool for destruction, but a force for bringing others together. The Consciousness Network continued to grow, connecting more minds and species with each passing year. Wars became rare, and when conflicts did arise, they were usually resolved through